Yeah.
Yeah. Is that where you're at now? It's in Phoenix or no?
No, right now I'm on Vancouver Island in Canada.
Okay.
So West Coast, like a rainforest, the opposite of the desert.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
I kind of felt the same way when I lived in New England. I was living in Connecticut, and I was in the Navy for 10 years in the submarine force. And so when I got out, it was we were just getting hit with all this snow, like left and right. And I was outside shoveling all the snow, and we had this massive driveway. There was three of us renting this beautiful home. It was 1,500 rent for the month, and each one of us paid 500 into the pot. And it was off the beaten path in these woods, but the house was glorious, had these floor to ceiling windows. And so it was a little taste of what, eventually, I would come to enjoy for myself. But the driveway was, you had to go down this long dirt road, and then it was actually the paved driveway. And so, uh, it's probably a good 30 feet of driveway that I had to shovel, and my back was so killing me by the end of that winter that when I went to Florida for an event the following October, I had PTSD, I guess you could say, of like shoveling all this snow from the last winter. And I was in this
Mhm.
transition period where I'm like, I don't really know kind of what I'm doing with my life right now. I'm rebuilding everything. And Florida was that way for me as Arizona is for you. I'm just like, we were in Naples, and I remember waking up at the hotel and going downstairs, which was like 5:30 a.m. watching the sunrise, which for me at that time was rare. Like I was not an early bird back then. But I remember this magical feeling of like there's something new rising in my life, and I don't know what it is, but I think it's in Florida. And then my my one of my first mentors was the one putting on that event, and she had told me, she said, Ben, do you want to move with me down to Florida, because this is where I'm moving. And I'm like, I don't really know, I have all my friends and everything, in Connecticut. And she goes, well, you could either suffer in Connecticut or you could suffer in Florida. And I'm like, I would choose Florida. So I went back. I had helped her put together her event, um, and I was the audio video guy. And so I came back to Connecticut, and that Thursday I met all my friends out at the bar. That just tells you where I was in my life at the time. And I told them, I'm like, hey guys, I'm moving to Florida. And they're like, oh, cool. When? I'm like, Monday. And they're like, whoa, all right. Well, that's right away. I'm like, yep. And I did. I took the leap and moved to Florida, and that's a whole nother story. But I just that was a quantum leap that I made, and I had no logical reason to make it at all. But I just trusted that there was something there for me, and there was. Yeah, it was really good.
Yeah, I think that's when one of the things that I've learned in the last year and a half, especially, but maybe the last like 5 years, is that yeah, like one of the hardest questions I have answering is why. Like people are like, why are you doing this or why are you doing that? And I'm like, it's just like actually, like you said, where you're just, it wasn't necessarily logical or whatever. You had these little pieces, this mentor who was moving to Florida, like, but there's something there where it's just like a deeper knowing that that's what you're meant to do. And when we battle that logic with the logic mind, I just find it entertaining to observe myself resist it because it's like the deep knowing is there. And when I follow that deep knowing, everything is fine. When I resist it is where the like sort of struggle comes in or the friction. I wanted to just quickly pause and say welcome to the Warriors Race podcast. And thank you so much
Yes.
for joining me,
Happy
Ben
to be
Perry.
here.
It's an honor to have you here. And yeah, I'm excited to dive in with you today.
Yeah. Do you have a particular direction that you want to go?
I love to let these conversations unfold to have like deep trust that whatever is meant to be shared will be shared. I would love to um, start with, if you want to share, I'd love to know like what brought you to the Marines? Like what was the initial, what was happening
The
in your,
Navy.
oh, sorry, the Navy. What was the
Yeah.
initial, yeah, you're probably going to correct me lots because I don't know
Yeah.
that much about it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, like what was the initial, what was going on in your life that led to that decision?
Yeah, so I was it's actually very interesting. How much time do you have? No, so I was 18 and I was with my high school sweetheart and we had gotten pregnant. We had already been out of high school, so this was now the following fall after we had graduated high school, or I graduated. She actually didn't. She dropped out. Um, and there was, you have to know that at the time I was so vehemently against joining the military. I had zero intention of ever joining the military because to me, I'm like, as soon as you join, that's it. They own you. You're lock stock. You're basically just a cog in a wheel. And I'm like, I have no desire to go down that road at all. And I was 18. I'm like, I have my whole life ahead of me. Like, no. Well, fast forward 2 months. And, my high school girlfriend, or my high school sweetheart, we get pregnant and everything kind of snowballed. But I think it's important to also note some context because me and her, we went to a psychic, a palm reader, which was actually like right behind our neighborhood. And I remember she was seen, right? And she had her palm read individually inside the room. And the lady had this, it was a house. So it was her own residence, but she had a room in the front. And it was one of these old-timey houses, like from the early 1900s, like the Victorian era. It was still this really, really architecturally really nice house. And so it had, the neon sign that said psychic. And we were just like, hey, this is kind of fun. So she goes in, she gets her palm read, she comes out. I go in and it's this small room and there's two chairs, that are kind of almost next to each other with a lamp in between. And um there was no crystal ball. There was none of that. But she said, and she was explaining to me that she's like fifth or sixth generation psychic, and her daughter is already starting to experience some of the gifts that she has. So it's like this has been in the family for a while. And the way that she read my palm, it wasn't like, she took it and was like studying it, in her hands and like doing all the things. She very simply, now that we have video, I normally am explaining this, but she just says, put your hands together like this and tilt them towards me so I can see. And this is how she read my palm, like this.
Hmm.
And there was a couple things that stood out to me that she said. And she said, well, first of all, um, you will marry the woman that you're with now. And I was like, yeah, right. No way. Like, I'm gonna be, single guy, forever. I'm 18, right? And she's like, okay. And then she says, you will have at least one kid by the time you're 23. And I'm like, what? Again, no way. What are you talking about? And then she tells me, I see you in the military for many, many years. And I'm like, okay, well, I know you're full of it now because I am vehemently against the military, all the things I just told you. And she goes, really? Hmm, just think about it. So I left that palm reader like shaken, not stirred. Because I'm just like, all right, I'm looking, at my high school girlfriend. I'm like, I love her, but do I really want to spend my life with her? It's like I'm 18, like I'm a whole life ahead of me. Well, again, fast forward 2 months, we find out she's pregnant after a series of pregnancy scares, and we had always talked about how we were not going to keep it. Like if something happened, that was just we're way too young, we're not responsible. But when the moment came and she told me, actually, she didn't even tell me. We had met each other because we were 18, didn't have a car of our own. So we were walking to each other. And I could tell that it was different, this walk that she had as she was approaching me. She had this piece of paper in her hands, and I was just like, so what happened? She just handed me the piece of paper, and on the piece of paper, I'm like looking at it, and it says pregnant, yes. The little checkbox says yes. And it took me like a moment to realize what I was looking at. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so I just looked up at her and I said, I'm gonna be a daddy. That was it. From there, I was like, my whole world changed in that moment. Um, and so I knew I needed to step up. And at the time, I was a cart pusher at Target. And I knew that there's no way that I was going to be able to provide and support her and this new child. Um, Long story short, these army guys came up to me, while I was pushing carts, and they flanked me. At the time I was a chain smoker, just smoking, a pack a day. So I'm out there having my smoke break, and they're like, they have their sunglasses on, and they like flank me, both of them. I can't see their eyes at all. And they're just like, I'm not going to beat around the bush. I'll just tell you exactly. Here's the benefits. Here's what's going to happen. We pay for this. We pay for that. Think about it. Go Army, and they walked away. And I was like, well, I like the idea of the benefits, but I don't like the Army. But let's see. And I don't like the Marines because they're crazy, and I'm not crazy. And the Air Force, it's like, well, my eyesight isn't very good, and I think you have to have really good eyesight in order to join the Navy or the Air Force. So I'm like, the Navy is the last thing that makes sense, and I heard the Navy's got really good schooling. So fast forward, this was only a couple weeks before that these guys had approached me. Now that I find out that she's pregnant, I proposed to her the very next day. And I remember her parents were, you know, easygoing people. Her stepdad had a bong. He just was very just out there, and he's always had a bong on the coffee table. And so we told them that we're pregnant, and then also we're getting married, and they were like, "Oh, oh!" And the stepdad, this huge bong, he just goes, slides it towards me. He's like, "You might need this." So, so we get married less than a month later, and I join the Navy, and I get shipped out April of the following year, and that's what started my Navy career. So that's what led up to me actually joining. I knew that I wanted to do the right thing. I wanted to be honorable. I wanted to have integrity. And so I did what I thought was best. Not necessarily what I wanted, out of a sense of personal wants. But I recognized, I was like, well, it's no longer just about me. So how can I how can I step up? And so that's what I did. So yeah, have any other questions to guide me there? Or
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. What was that like when you were getting shipped off or whatever? What was your experience? Were you like excited? Was it mixed? I'm really curious what the experience was of like entering into that environment and
Mhm.
imagine being very different from anything you'd experienced up until that point. Maybe not.
Um, yes and no. So, um, I had a really rough childhood, just rough family life, and it was so rough and so insane that um, I ended up moving out when I was 16 and moving in with my friend and his mother, because they understood, what was going on was not right, and long and short of it is I was gaslit and just abused in every possible way, um, physically and sexually molested. Like so that was the big push that got them to really get me out of there. And so for the first time in my life, this lady, Martha, she she really put it all on the line for me to like take me in. And from 16 until I joined and shipped off when I was 19, I got to experience what it's like to be treated like a human being and, to have my own wants and desires respected, to be heard. It was the greatest gift you could possibly give somebody in that regard. Now, when you say it was probably something you never experienced before when you joined the Navy, well, hindsight's always 2020. And so I find it very just this cosmically like just humor that I would get out of a situation where I was gaslit and it was just intense and pressure for me to have a brief 3 years of like, this is really great, only to voluntarily go back into the very same thing. And so I don't want to say that the military is just that. Were some really good things that happened too, but
Mhm.
definitely boot camp just puts you right back to where you are nothing, right? They break you down. They literally, any of your sons go to the military at all? No?
No, no.
So, like, when you first get to boot camp, they keep you up for 3 days straight to break you.
Mhm.
Like, you are not allowed to sleep. And by the time you even get to the end of it, you're just so exhausted, you just want to sleep. You just want it just to stop. And so that's a very effective way of getting people to do what you want them to do. Um, we can go deeper into that, but you know, boot camp was boot camp. At the end of the day, I didn't think it was that bad. Hindsight being 2020. Um, Lots of calisthenics, lots of you're gonna do this and not that. Um, it all culminated in what's called battle stations. And battle stations. I went to boot camp in Great Lakes, so there's it was very cold when we were there because I got there in April and we did 10 weeks of boot camp. And at the end of it, we did something called battle stations. And battle stations is where you know, you got to do all the crazy stuff that you've been learning over the last 10 weeks. And you do it at night. It like starts at 10 o'clock at night, and then like explosions are happening, and like we got to carry this gurney with this person, and like be ducked down and like through like a fake tunnel. We had to jump off of like a freaking 30 or 40-foot diving board into like the water with boots on and everything and act like the ship was going down.
Mhm.
Like, which by the way, I'm not a swimmer. Like that's not, I mean, I can swim, but I'm not like, treading water. I'm just like, yeah, no, that's not for me. I don't really like this. And so I had to face a lot of my fears in boot camp. And the thing that kept me going, honestly, was I'm doing this for them. I'm doing
Mhm.
this for, my then wife, because we got married, and my future daughter. And that's what really, really kept me going because it was if somebody didn't have a reason to keep going, I could see myself just tapping out.
Mhm.
But I was able to channel into, you know, I was doing it for more than just myself.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And what was that like with your then wife? Like, did you guys get to see each other? What's the I don't I'm like very unfamiliar with what that looks like when you're in a boot camp or in the Navy like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Boot camp, you could write letters. And we wrote a lot of letters. And those letters, it's like something out of the notebook, you know.
Mhm.
We were very, lovey-dovey to each other. And it really helped morale, for the people that were at the, in boot camp. Um, I didn't see her again until I graduated boot camp. And at that time, she was 7 months pregnant. So I hadn't, she was sending me photos, but I hadn't seen her since, she was just a couple months pregnant. And it was it was really nice, for us. But we only saw each other for a weekend, and then I was shipped off to my next command. So it was a brief weekend, and then I'm off. And then so that's when I moved to Connecticut because that's where I was stationed at the submarine base up there. And then she moved up with our daughter 30 days after she was born. And so then we got a house together. The Navy provided a house for us together. And that period from when she moved up, that was, I want to say September. Yeah, yeah. September of 2004. We had this house together and then started 2 years of just absolute hell because we were not compatible. I was hardly there because I was constantly, going to school in the Navy, and the Navy was so like, you have to do this, jump how high, and I barely got to see my daughter. I'm coming home exhausted, and it's where we were at the time. We did some really bad things, to each other. Like she cheated on me, I cheated on her. It was a complete breakdown of our relationship. And she ended up moving away. Um, 2 years later, back to Texas with her daughter, and we knew that that was it. And we had tried 3 times within that 2 year period to reconcile. Um, and she moved back to Houston with her daughter, and then 6 months later, she moved to Utah with a lady that she met in Navy housing, and that's where she that's where she still is to this day.
Mhm. Yeah. Through all that time, I'm curious, um were there other men? Was it all men in the Navy at that point?
Um, no, there was no women in the submarine force.
Mhm.
I can tell you that. Um, but there were women on the base, but they were corpsmen, and corpsmen are like, nurses basically.
Mhm.
And so um that was the only place on base where like women were. So it was almost like the sorority of the base, and you have all these men that are over here in the men's barracks, and then you have the corpsman barracks that have all the women. Yeah, that's
Mhm.
it.
I'm curious during that time if there were like any friendships that you had or people in your life that that helped you through that time or that were like your brotherhood through that time, through that experience of, you're a teenager when you start, you just got married, just had a baby,
Mm,
relationship troubles. Um,
no.
no. That was a lot. I was like
No.
waiting for it, but yeah.
No. No. You can probably tell from my silence. Yeah, thinking back on it, I mean, I was very distrusting of a lot of people. I was distrusting of almost everybody. Um, there was one individual when I got to the boat who, we kind of created a friendship together, and he had gotten out basically just a couple months after I got to the boat, and we still had kept this relationship where he ended up going to college at the University of Connecticut. And it was like my kind of link to the outside world, to the civilian world, from somebody who understood what it was like to be in the Navy. And so that was really nice. But, you know, as far as like having a mentor, somebody who was like, didn't really have any mentors. Um, and then as far as like a brotherhood, you know, we were young kids, and it's hard to say that we were actually either one of us was actually good for each other to lead each other, and um so yeah, it was kind of a very isolated period for me the entire time that I was in the Navy. I made some friends, with some people outside of the Navy. Um And, at the time, I had relationships with multiple girls that were also like friends. And that was a form of connection. But there wasn't really like a brotherhood for me. Um, so yeah.
Mhm. What's it like now? Like when you think back, how long has it been since you've been out of the Navy?
November 19th, 2013 was my last day in the Navy.
Okay, so 12, coming up on like
Coming
11,
up on,
coming up on
yeah,
12 years this year. Yeah.
yeah. So it was, and how I got out was really interesting. I think you know my story a little bit.
Yeah,
Um,
I'd love for you to share if you want to share.
yeah. So, um, I knew that I wanted to get out of the Navy. Um, I had reenlisted at my 4.5 year mark for another 6 years because at the time it was the end of 2008. The economy had crashed, and there wasn't a whole lot of job prospects out there. And they offered me $60,000 to reenlist, paid out over the next 6 years. And I'm like, all right, well, $10,000 when I'm making maybe three, like this is a lot of money. Like, let's do it. And so I said yes, and then didn't, without even realizing that half that money went to Uncle Sam off the cuff.
Mhm.
So I only really saw maybe, I mean, I was supposed to get half of the 30. I saw 19,000. And then I was supposed to get paid $6,000 every October after I'm reenlisted, and that ended up only being like 4,000. And so and $4,000, like is a lot of money to like come into, sure, but $4,000 spends so fast.
Mhm.
And so it almost feels like it was a mirage. Like I would have been much better getting out and just figuring out like entrepreneurship like I really wanted to. So that was a lesson for me. Like, don't always take the money because the money will come and go. But, if you sell your soul, then, what do you have left? So, but I reenlisted and I realized kind of 2 years into my now 6 year new enlistment that I wanted out of the Navy. Now, my daughter was still living with her mother in Utah, and I wanted to be able to live with her. So in the Navy, you have 4 to 5 to 6 year like time lengths of like sea duty where you're attached to a warship, and then you get 3 years of shore duty where you get a break from the craziness of being out to sea. And so during this 3 year period that I was coming up for my shore duty, I got a 2 bedroom apartment so that I could have one room for my daughter and one room for me. And right when she was supposed to, come live with me, she went into the hospital with a tummy ache and came out with cancer. I was like, what? She's 6 years old. It was neuroblastoma. There was already a mass the size of her fist in the small of her back, and it already started to push her spine, um, not centered. And so all talks of her coming to live with me completely evaporated. It was just, let's take care of her. I went out and saw her as much as I could while I was stationed in the Navy at shore duty. They were very understanding. Um, and so she ended up in remission. She went through chemotherapy, bone marrow transplant, radiation. She went through all of the things. And there was one period, um, like a year later, where she she went into she got some type of cold, like bronchitis or pneumonia or something, and like she was put into a medically induced coma because it was that rough. And so I flew out December of 2011 to see her, and to see your child just with all the tubes in them, this itty bitty girl. head shaved. It was rough.
Mm. How old was she at that point?
7.
Mm.
Yeah. And I was by her side for 30 days through Christmas. She was in this medically induced coma, and I had to leave. I had to go back to, my my station in Connecticut. And they woke her up 2 days after I left. So I was there the longest time that I'd ever been with her, and she didn't even have any memory of me being there. So I now know that I can't get out of the Navy. The Navy's taking care of 100% of our medical bills. And so I'm just like, I feel like a bird in a cage with the cage open, and I can't fly out.
Mm.
Like it's right there, but there's no way for me to do it. And so I spiraled into a deep depression because I'm just like, "Dude, this is hell for my daughter. This is hell for me. I don't want to be here anymore." It's the law of diminishing returns for the Navy. The Navy has given me, really good discipline and order. Um, but my dream is to, pursue this entrepreneurial goal of like wanting to help people, be a coach, be a mentor. I wanted to do this ever since 2001.
Mm.
So it's now fast forward, it's like 2013, and I'm just
Mm.
like, so I started to self-medicate, if you could call it that, with cocaine.
Mhm.
And I got caught in a random urinalysis and swiftly kicked out. And so that was November of 2013, and I lost all of her medical benefits. Never mind the fact that I lost, my job. Um, you know, the people in the Navy were yelling at me and saying, "You won't even be able to get a job at McDonald's now because you're getting kicked out for drug abuse." And so when I left, I was both sad and euphoric at the same time. Because even though my life was falling apart in the most explosive, beautiful way,
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
I knew that I was now free to pursue my entrepreneurial endeavors. I didn't know how I was going to do it. I had no clue. Um, but there's a quote from J.K. Rowling that says that, from rock bottom is what we use to like, you use as a foundation to rebuild your life. That that was true for me. But at the time, I was so ostracized and so like um just lonely. Her, of course, her mother wouldn't talk to me, her stepfather wouldn't talk to me. My own family basically turned their back on me. I was alone. And
Mhm.
this was when I moved. Um and this is when I found that lady who through the event in Naples, she was connected to a few people that I was really, resonating with. And I'm like, well, I don't have a lot of experience and I don't have a lot of, I don't have any money to give her to pay her. But what I do have is my own time and, energy to be able to invest. And so I just volunteered to be able to help this lady. And she invited me down to help her put this event together, which made it possible for me to meet a bunch of other people that were in the entrepreneurial world on their own journeys. And, and then that's when I'm in this deep, dark place. It's cold, right? Like, all this snow and I'm having to shovel everything. And I'm just really, pondering, what am I doing with my life? How am I going to be doing? Yeah, how am I going to move forward? And this was an opportunity for me to reset the board and get clean energy and move to Florida. And when I did that, it was like night and day.
Nothing like a lot of driveway shoveling to bring that kind of clarity.
Yeah.
I'm joking, but yeah, like a fresh start on life, even through these like really. I think it's always interesting. Like I often look at like how God is like guiding us, or like those are my beliefs. But it's interesting that you're essentially like your cocaine habit, which was how you were like
Coping.
self-medicate coping, self-soothing, self-medicating, whatever, like to deal with your situation, which then became this like blessing in disguise of you being like this whole all these things that were set up for you that essentially started to feel like you were trapped in a life that you didn't want, all just kind of like rug pulled out from you, and now you're like, okay, we're gonna entrepreneurship is my only option right now, it sounds like. But also like you said, that energy of excitement as well. um what happened next? That's really my question. It's like, please continue with the story, because I'm sure there's more.
Yeah. Well, so, I ended up moving to Orlando and joining um attending a film school. So I was able to have my GI Bill actually cover the tuition to go to Full Sail University to get my film degree, which I got a couple years later. But because I had one full and complete tour of duty, that was over 3.5 years, that qualified me as true and faithful service, or however they call it, for me to use my GI Bill. So, silver lining there. So I go to, I'm starting to go to film school, and because I'm thinking in my mind, like, I went to 6 months of community college up in Connecticut, and man, it was the most boring thing in the world. Like, don't make me go back to that. Like, this is so dumb. And so I'm like, if I'm going to go to college, let me at least go to college for something fun. Like, let me do something, pursue my curiosity. And so I joined with the intention of learning for myself to be in front of the camera, but it was all teaching me how to be behind the camera, and the talent is them, and then we're the crew. There's lighting and grip and all these things, on a film set. And I learned very quickly that I'm thankful for the lighting and grip guys in the very, very beginning, because they were like, here's what your life's going to look like joining basically Hollywood, the film industry. You're going to show up to the set and you're going to be a PA, right? And you're basically going to eat shit until you're able to rise up, and then eventually, you'll get paid more. But for the time being, you're going to work 12-hour days, you're going to get paid $150, and you're going to love it. And you're just going to build your way up. And I'm thinking in the back of my head, fuck that. Like, I just did 10 years of that. No,
Mhm.
no way. And
Mhm.
so I very quickly kind of disassociated with the dream that they were like painting for me. I'm like, no, 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 no. But I was 30 years old at the time when I was going to the college, and I'm surrounded by all these 18, 19, 20-year olds, which is just like very interesting to be the older guy, in a class full of younger kids. And so what I did was I ended up pulling out student loans, right? So that I could buy a camera, so that I could invest into programs that would actually teach me about sales and marketing. Investing into some of Jesse's earlier stuff is where some of that money went.
Mhm.
And I'm very thankful that I did that, because, you know, that led me to learning how to actually, do sales and marketing, how to actually attract people, how to make a compelling argument, how to put together offers, just the very basics of the getting of the clients. Like, people are very good at what they do, but a lot of times people don't have any idea how to actually like a formula, be like, do this, then this, and this, and you'll get clients. None of that. And so I basically went through this like period of learning from different people left and right. And then, eventually, I invested in one program where I literally gave them my entire rent money. Like
Mhm.
that was it. There was no I had burned the boats on that. And eventually that company, asked me to join the team as a sales rep. And so I agreed. And then, fast forward a couple of months and, I'm making fairly good money from all of this time that I spent learning about sales and marketing. And then, you know, at that point, this was in 2000, this was in 2020. So I
Mhm.
was out of the Navy, almost 7 years at this point. And at this point, I'm now making, enough money to where it's like, all right, this is, never what I thought was possible. Um, Fast forward a few more years, and I'm helping people with their sales teams, building their sales teams. I'm working with some of the biggest names in the industry, the internet marketing industry, if you will. And then fast forward to now, where I'm working with arguably one of the most well-known, influencers teaching people about sales and marketing. And now, not every month, but some months, I now make more money in 1 month than I did the entire last year that I was in the Navy.
Mhm.
So that's my comebackstory.com.
Yeah, yeah, that's really cool. And when you were in that like transition time of figuring out sales and marketing, what was that like for you? Like, did you just know that you were going to be good at it? Because I know, like, when I first met you, that was kind of like, I think how Jesse introduced you was just like that you were a little bit of a god in the sales and marketing industry, right? Like that was your specialty, that you had it dialed. Did you know that you were like, was it an easy thing for you to like learn and deliver on? I'm curious. What was the process like?
Not at all.
Okay.
Not at all. I remember my first mentor that I hired this guy months after I got out. I mean, I got out in November. I pulled out my military retirement in February and paid this guy $2,000 to have him mentor me. And then you know, I used some of the money to pay down some debt, which I really wish I wouldn't have done that. I was trying to support something that was already it was I would have been better investing the thing in other things, but I'm sore that I spent 10 years in the military and I had less than $9,000 saved in savings. Like, what? I make that in a week sometimes now. Like,
Yeah.
what? Like it's a whole different game. But no, it was not easy for me. And I remember hiring this mentor, and I went to this sales conference. It was a 2-day sales conference in San Diego. And we're basically day one, they teach you how to do the sales. Day two, you get on the phones and call people. Now it's supposed to be your own leads, but I didn't have any. And so my mentor gave me his. And then we left that little period and I went back home to Connecticut and I started dialing these people. And guess what? I didn't close a single person. I mean, I spent like 6 months dialing this guy's list, and I only found out after the fact that he had given me a burned list of people that had already said, bug off. Like, I don't want this. Like, get out of here.
Oh,
And
that's
so
rude.
I'm showing up full of all this vinegar and spunk, and I'm just getting rejected left and right for 6 months straight. Like to keep doing something without seeing results, it's called the definition of insanity, but that's how much like belief I had in myself. I'm like, oh, we'll figure this out. I just didn't have the right strategy.
Mhm.
And it wasn't just the right strategy. I also needed to go on my own journey of just learning how to adopt a better identity.
Mhm. Like more confidence in yourself, you mean? Or what do you mean by adopt a better identity?
I think that when you go from being surrounded by a group of people that um, they see it as an offense if you're going to charge anything for your services, um, people who don't have a lot of money, people who have poverty mindsets, it's really hard to break out of that. If you don't, if A, you don't have somebody that you can model ahead of you, and B, if you have the courage enough to pursue that path, because what you're essentially doing is you are turning your back on those people in order to help yourself grow. And I've since learned that that's what you have to do. You have to do that in order to help yourself. And I remember it was Jesse Elder that taught me this distinction, which I still use to this day when people want to, ask me for discounts for any of the things that we sell. I'm just like, look, I would never do that to you because I would be voting against you. The whole point of this is to help you grow, expand, and evolve. And if I gave you a discount, I would be robbing you of the journey that it would take for you to be the person that's required in order to live at this level. And so as a mentor, as somebody who's inspiring, we get to reach down and pull people up to where we are. You cannot strengthen the weak by weakening the strong. And so that was my kind of wake up call that kind of gave me the logical reason to be in alignment and congruency to pursue this and not have any qualms, no insecurity about it. Because I'm a very caring and wanting people to win, but I can't want something more than they're able to want it for themselves. And so out of this like, state of I guess people pleasing, it's like none of this energy is going to help me get to where I'm going and these people just want to complain and spin around in circles and I could try to help them or I could take a concerted effort to try to help myself and then from a place of power can I reach back down and help pull these people up to where I'm at provided that they actually want to go there.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, that's a big one. It's I could speak a lot to that, but that will turn into a different podcast.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
well,
I
especially
know
what
you know this.
well, yeah, especially that discernment of knowing if someone is committed, like if are they committed to their vision, to their dream, and not you being more committed. That's the danger zone that I get into is like I get more committed sometimes than my clients. Like, okay, that's not healthy.
Yeah.
But um how's it going now for you? I'm like, what's the what's working in your life right now that you're really excited about? What would you where are the areas that you want to grow? Like I'm curious right now. Like there's a lot of journey behind you, like a lot of water under the bridge, a lot of we didn't finish the story about your daughter either. I feel like I would love to, if you're into it, finish that story. I know I just jumped all over the place.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Do you want to do like a part two? Because I know that we're reaching the top of our hour.
Yeah, we totally could do that if are you, yeah, 100%. That
Yeah,
would be
I am
great.
open to that. I'm sorry. I have
Oh,
a
no,
I have a lot, I guess, to say.
I
And
would love to do a part two. Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Then we could definitely do that. What I can say right now to answer your last question, what am I most proud of right now? Well, me and my wife, we just had our first son, and that was 4.5, almost 5 months now. So he's almost 5 months old, um, and it's uh, it's a glorious thing for me because it's allowing me to be present, and to basically have a second chance of being a father and getting
Mhm.
to raise this little individual and cherishing every moment with him. Everywhere from, his drools, his slobbers, his burp ups to, the copious amounts of diapers that we're changing, and just this sense of pee everywhere. It's just everywhere. Which is interesting because, I had a dream that, you know, where I thought that my son had died. And it's kind of morbid, but like I was devastated in the dream. And when I woke up, I he was there, right? And he was, he was in the bed with us. We're like co-sleeping, so he's just there. And I could tell that he's peed his diaper. And so I was smelling, the pee. And there was this sense of like, oh my gosh, thank God for the smell of pee, because like it means he's alive. He's with us. He's amazing. And so I share that story because I have so much appreciation for every little moment, and I feel like I am constantly like going back from my like 70, 80-year-old self back to this moment when he's a baby and being like, I'm getting to enjoy all of this right now and just soaking in and sucking the marrow out of just being a father. That's what's really good for me right now.
Yeah, that is on. I mean, as you know, my kids are 15, 17, 22, and the time that you're in right now, like you only do that once. It's a one shot deal, and it happens like this. Like it's so fast.
Yeah.
And I look at who my kids are today. I know like my parenting was not perfect by any stretch of imagination. I know that the foundation that they have really came from the connectivity of their early years. Like they were always held. They never were left to cry anything out. Like they slept in our bed. You know what I mean? Like it's just you're just giving. I feel like no matter what income bracket anyone's at, or no matter what your life is like, if you can just keep them close in those years, carry them around, don't let them cry. Like it makes a huge difference. Anyways, I won't go
Yeah.
into that, but thank you very much, Ben. I know you got to go. And
Yeah.
is there anything else you want to share in closing today or in wrapping up?
I mean, this is your show. I'm taking your lead.
Okay, I will, if I have time for one last question, if you could, any advice to like young men thinking about going into the Navy or military, what would your words be?
Hmm. I would ask yourself why. Why are you doing it? Um, I didn't have a lot of people in my corner when I was considering joining the Navy. Um, I was an 18-year-old that was doing drugs back then. I was doing cocaine back then. Now the Navy helped me stop that from a young age. Obviously, I started up again. But the it was funny because when my when my high school girlfriend got pregnant, everybody around me was like, "You need to do the right thing. You need to marry her." And then when I was talking about getting into the Navy, they were like, "Yes, this is an honorable thing to do. Like, we got love for our troops." This was 2004, so we had all of this national pride about the military because 9/11 just happened 2.5 years before. So there was this huge, especially in Texas, it was like this huge thing of like, oh my gosh, yes, go be the hero. And the only person that told me, yeah, maybe you might not want to join the Navy was the drug dealer
Hmm.
that I got my stuff from. And so it was the only person. And so, but looking back on it, why did I join? Well, I joined so that I could provide for my family and so that I could provide for, my future daughter. But if I could go back and redo it, I would go find people who were already making money right now in some type of entrepreneurial endeavor and just go be an apprentice to them. And I promise you, you would learn more in 6 months than the entire 10 years that I was in the Navy. It, and here's the thing about this is going to ruffle some feathers, but I don't care. So the Navy sells independence while breeding dependence. So I'd be very mindful about the decisions you make around it. Do I think that, it's good and that we need to defend ourselves, and to have a military, yes. But at the end of the day, if you want to be a person who is autonomous and critically thinking, I don't think being in service and those two things equal. I don't think they're the same.
Mm. Yeah, that's a really like just to bookmark that. It's a conversation I'd love to have with like a handful of people who've experienced the military. Like, what would a more sovereign military in the U.S. look like? But that's a tangent. But
Yeah.
like, what would that look like? Where you get to be part of that, defending the country and all of that, but actually from a place of building sovereignty or independence rather than what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think it comes from people, not to open the loop, but I think it comes from people that know who they are. They're secure in themselves. And like the late great Jim Rohn would say, look, I'll take care of me for you if you take care of you for me. So we're interdependent. And I think that could work if everybody is able to be a sovereign and take care of themselves and then come together willingly. But what I'm seeing is that it's very predatory. It's very like getting the people who aren't, they don't have a leg up. They don't have, these things figured out. And there's a lot of there's a lot of gaslighting that's happening. And I don't know that people would choose it if they could already take care of themselves.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I imagine that's like a really huge percentage of young men joining. It's like exactly that, where it's like a,
Well,
yeah.
you join because you feel like you don't have any other options, but there's a lot of different options out there than just that. I mean, you could say that I'm lucky because 10 years, man, I mean, I know people that are no longer with us that were in.
Mhm. Mhm.
That very, very well could have been my fate.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, yeah, yeah. We'll have to do a part two.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time today, Ben. And I'm looking forward to part two with you. And I hope you have a beautiful day and a great night's sleep with your, do we say newborn? Not newborn, your 4.5 month old.
Yeah, I'm 4.5 month old. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thank
Wonderful.
you, Veronica.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. Bye for
All
now.
right. See ya.